This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the CAC meeting on the September. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. So can everybody see my screen? Oh, can everybody see my screen? No?
No.
No.
No. Okay. Hold on. There we go. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, here we go.
So we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. We've got some exciting stuff. So because of a couple of one of our presenters can't join the meeting until a little bit later because he's at another event. So we're gonna kind of like switch the meeting schedule around a little bit. So we're gonna do sort of like the business announcement side of things at the beginning and then do the presentations at the end. So again, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Sheila Scalaro. For those of you, we have a few new people today. I'm Sheila Scalaro. I'm the Community Advisory Committee organizer for the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And then we also have Jessica, who's our program specialist, and Joe Whalen, who is kind of our communications and design expert. So that's us on the TBEP side. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through and do kind of an attendance. So is Jan here?
I do not see her listed up there.
Sue, I think I saw Sue.
I'm here.
Hey, Sue. Harry, you're here.
Yes.
Stephanie, I think I saw Stephanie pop.
I'm here.
Hey. Frank or Ernie, sorry. Dylan, is Dylan on? Cynthia, Mike, Marjorie. Yeah,
Here.
I saw you. Okay. Erica. Yeah.
Here.
Liz. Nadine. Hey, Nadine.
Here. Yeah.
Paige. Blake. Yeah. Hey, Blake. Thanks for joining. And then Dr. Porter, are you on? And then Christine. Okay, so we're missing a few people, but that's okay. Hopefully they'll pop in a little bit later. So a few months ago, we did put out a call for CAC applications to help fill some of the vacancies on the Community Advisory Committee. So as outlined in our bylaws, each policy board member is allowed to nominate or appoint one Community Advisory Committee member, like to represent their community. So right now we have about, like I said, 13 people that are at large. And so you're just community members who are interested. And so we have some vacancies on the appointee side. So we received about 10 applications and we've sent them to the policy board members to review the different applications. And so I'd like to welcome George Davis. Is George on tonight?
No.
Look like it. But George Davis is one of our newest members. He was selected by Council Member Beckman to be the representative for the city of Clearwater on the CAC. So welcome, George. Hopefully he'll listen in on this.
Sheila, do you have his cell phone? I'll shoot him a text just to make sure he's not having trouble getting in.
His phone number is on, if you click on the
okay.
On his application, his phone number is on there. That would be awesome if you could.
Yeah.
So I know there are a few other folks who applied, and we still are waiting for final approvals from the policy board. So thanks so much for your interest in joining the CAC, and hopefully we'll be bringing you on shortly. So if you're interested to learn about George, feel free, you can click on his application access it through the meeting agenda. So just some announcements and CAC roundtable. So the Bay Mini grant application closed on Friday. And this year, for those of you who weren't aware, we did prioritize Action IS2, which focuses on the removal, prevention, or management of invasive species in Tampa Bay. So we received 27 applications this year, and I think that it was a pretty good, a pretty diverse group of applications. The invasive species is a little bit more challenging of an action to focus on. So, but we did get some good applicants. We had some folks from the University of Tampa who are interested in doing an invasive cichlid fishing tournament to help remove some of the invasive cichlids in the estuary. So just some different unique projects. So, and if you are interested in looking over those, Jessica, oh, she's on the phone. Never mind. I can throw the link to those in the chat in a minute. But so CAC members, you guys are the ones who review all of these applications, and you do an amazing job at it. So I'm looking for about 5 CAC members to sit on and review Bay Mini grant applications. So is anybody interested and want to volunteer for the position? Oh, cool. Thanks, Erica.
Are you going to send them out via email, so to speak, or post them so that we can read them, or what?
Yes. So I can send it out to everybody who's interested. But for the review committee, what I did last year seemed to work pretty well. So each application will be reviewed. Oh, hey, Paige, welcome. Thanks. All right, so each application will be reviewed by 3 CAC members. And so in total, I think the CAC members will review about 15 grants. So that way you don't have to spend as much time reviewing all of the grants, but we still get a few eyes on every grant that was submitted. And I will submit out or send out exactly what grants I want folks to review. So cool. Thanks, Blake. Getting involved quick.
What is the time frame?
I'm hoping for 2 weeks, kind of a 2-week review period, and then vote on them. Well, if anybody changes your mind and you wanna pop in, thanks for the folks that have volunteered. Yeah, and I can send the link to those. Jessica, can you pull up the link to the Google Drive that has all of the Bay Mini grants?
Yeah, give me a second and I'll grab that.
Thank you. And then just drop it in the chat so people can look at the different grants. Thank you.
Yep.
So also just wanted to provide you guys a brief update on Piney Point. So for those of you who may or may not be aware, that in mid-August, for about 12 days, Piney Point discharged about 4.5 million gallons of what was called stormwater off of their off of the property. Does everybody know what Piney Point is? Okay, okay. Just want to make
If we
sure.
didn't,
So the discharge or the stormwater was released through Port Manatee, which is the same kind of discharge point that they or conveyance that they discharged the water last year. So at the estuary program and with our partners, we conducted water quality, seagrass, and macroalgae monitoring pre, during, and post the discharge. And we are working on developing a monitoring results brief similar to what we did last year. So we'll be sharing that. It'll probably be available early October, and so we'll be sharing that on our website. We'll share it out through our newsletters, I'm sure, on our social media. So just be on the lookout for that. Basically, what we did see elevated chlorophyll levels before the discharge even began, specifically around Cockroach Bay and around Joe Island, which is kind of the island just north of, or just east of the Skyway. We also saw an abundance of the cyanobacteria growth, both on the seagrasses as well as on the sediment surface. So that's very concerning. We've kind of been seeing a lot more of this cyanobacteria around all areas of the estuary. So that's something that we are keeping our eye on. And then there was a notable seagrass decline in at the sites that were north of Port Manatee. The full extent of the seagrass decline is to be determined. We have our seagrass monitoring is being conducted throughout the entire estuary right now, and SwiftMud, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, is should be releasing their 2022 seagrass maps here shortly. So just wanted to give you guys just a brief update on that. The nitrogen loads in the water was significantly less than last year. However, these episodic events in combination with our seasonal nitrogen loading presents a large challenge and can really stress the estuary. So we're holding our stand in, you know, we need to refocus and recenter at reducing all inputs into the estuary, no matter how big or small. So so are there any questions about Piney Point or anything along that?
Or do you post that? Is there an update page on the website if we went to TBEP? There is, right? Or some.
There isn't an update page. That's something that we can consider doing, an update page on the website. But right now, the website, the Piney Point will be added to the Piney Point page on the website. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Piney Point, and we can drop that in. Oops. Joe, maybe you can pull that
Just
up
added that
faster
to
than
the
I
chat.
can.
That link.
Thank you.
Yep, it should be in the chat right now.
Cool. Thanks. So yeah, those monitoring results should be available to you probably at the beginning of October. So be on the lookout for that. And then another announcement, just wanted to make you all aware that we have released our State of the Bay. Thanks, Joe, and all of the staff for putting that together. So the State of the Bay is a report that we put out every 3 years, and it presents our progress on and tracking our indicators of bay health. So the link is provided for you in the agenda, but we also have hard copies. So if you are interested in a hard copy, either for yourself or to pass out to people, just let me know. We'd be happy, myself or Joe know, and we'd be happy to get them to you. So we'll discuss the State of the Bay in greater detail at the next meeting. I just wanted to kind of give you the high level overview, kind of the main takeaways. One is that we are rapidly losing restorable habitat to development. We have also dropped below our seagrass acreage goal of 40,000 acres. And then Old Tampa Bay is experiencing seasonal harmful algae blooms that are increasing in density and duration. So just some things that it's not all sunshine here in the estuary right now. And so we do have some big challenges ahead of us. So take a look at that report to see the challenges as well as some of our successes that we've achieved over the last 3 years. And like I said, we'll talk about that in more detail next meeting. I'm kind of planning on having a full State of the Bay meeting where we'll have our updated seagrass report. We'll have an updated water quality report. So we'll be able to discuss State of the Bay and the state of the science a little bit in a little bit more detail. So any questions on that for now? Any comments on that? Has anybody seen the State of the Bay report yet? Awesome. And then the last thing that I had that I just want to make you all aware of, NOAA Marine Debris, they have a microfiber pollution report. And so they are currently accepting comments and feedback on their draft report through October 17th. So if you are interested in microplastics or microfiber pollution, this is a really good opportunity for you to provide some input into the federal, into the Fed. So this is in this report, they do present a plan for how agencies can work with stakeholders to really lead pollution reduction. So if you're interested, please take a look at it and please submit your comments. Again, the link is provided in the agenda, and the comments are due by October 17th. So, and if you go onto their website, like if you click onto the link, it has a link to the pollution report. And then it also has a link where you can register to submit comments. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. And then with that, September is Microplastics Awareness Month. So I thought it would be great to just bring some microplastics presentations to you guys to hopefully build your base knowledge about microplastics and what you can do to be part of the solution to help reduce microplastics. So this is kind of my first attempt at having these themed CAC meetings. So if you like the way that we're doing this, let me know. If you don't and you have other opinions, let me know too. So up first, we have Shannon Goins. And Amy, is Amy coming?
No, she's unfortunately, she was out in the field today, so she couldn't make it.
Okay, cool. Shannon is from Eckerd College, and she is presenting on microplastics in Tampa Bay. She's done extensive amount of research on microplastics, and part of the work that she's presenting today was funded through the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund. So this is one of the funding opportunities you can apply for at TBEP. And Jessica, if you have more you want to say on TBERF, please pipe in.
Well, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with TBERF, the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund, but the Bay Mini Grant and TBERF are really our two main grant programs. The Mini Grant, y'all are probably pretty familiar with. TBERF is like the big brother to the Mini Grant program. So looking at those restoration and research opportunities across the watershed, hit me up if you're interested, if you just want to learn more about it. I'm learning with you. I'm pretty new to helping with TBERF, but I would love to know what your questions are and I don't know, maybe figure out if you know of some good projects that could be a good applicant for TBERF in the future.
Thanks, Jessica. So without further ado, Shannon, take it away.
All right, and I'm assuming you're able to see my screen there?
Yes.
Perfect. So first off, this is a project that Amy Sweda and I have been operating since 2017, and we definitely do appreciate very much the TBERF funding. This was our funding for the first 3 years. We then received some continuing funding through the Hillsborough County Environmental Restoration Fund. Unfortunately, we're at this point where we do not actually have any funding, and that's something that we're actively trying to seek support to maintain this long-term monitoring. I'm going to give you an overview of what we found with monitoring in Tampa Bay and hopefully sow some seeds as to why this long-term monitoring is important, not just the kinds of things that TBERF's been doing, but adding in this potential new contaminant and trying to find ways to get a sustained funding stream for it. So we began this work after there'd been some brief initial look at microplastics in Tampa Bay, but we began this work to try and really come up with a systematic monitoring program so that we could really see, develop some baseline information about what's in Tampa Bay, and then also be able to do comparisons about how things might be changing over time, and especially, as you'll see, to potentially respond to unusual events. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, as we talk about microplastics, there's lots of different definitions for plastic sizes. Generally, what you hear in the media and what's largely reported in the scientific information is microplastic pieces are those pieces sort of 5 millimeters and smaller. So largely we're thinking about the size of your fingernail and smaller pieces of plastic. They of course can get smaller and smaller, breaking down into those smaller and smaller pieces. But as we get to those smaller pieces, it gets much, much harder to detect them. So what size pieces you're able to see depends on how you collect them, and then also what kinds of methods you have to detect them. The bigger pieces are pretty easy, but one of the things that we have is, and I'll show you, we use surface net tows to collect the plastic that's floating along the surface. This does a good job of collecting some of those bigger pieces, but typically the mesh size is about 0.3 millimeters. So those smaller pieces disappear through the net and are left in the environment. You can collect a mass water sample or a discrete sample using a bottle or a bucket. These typically aren't going to collect those big pieces because those big pieces are much, much rarer in the environment. So they can get to those much smaller pieces. Depending on your detection methods, these can be much smaller than a millimeter in size. And I'll show you the technique we've been using at Eckert that will show you how we've been able to detect some of these smaller pieces. So I also want to give you a global context of what we've been seeing in the environment and where a lot of the large-scale concern has come from. So some of the early work on microplastics was definitely looking at offshore, and particularly these locations you may have heard of, the North Pacific garbage patch found in this region here in red, in the middle of the gyres where plastic can concentrate. This first image here, this multicolored image, what it's looking at is model predictions of plastic density based on thousands of surface tows. So here we're looking at those, 0.3 millimeters and larger pieces. And we can get fairly high quantities. So between 1 and 1 million particles per square kilometer, depending on the density of those particles. Lower concentrations in the southern hemispheres and highest in those gyres in the center. If we look at these models, what they come out trying to predict, if we look at the North Atlantic, estimated about 1.3 trillion particles per kilometer squared, and in the global ocean overall, about 51.2 trillion particles. So it can be really high. So what do we have in Tampa Bay? So using models that are methods that are fairly similar to those offshore cruises, we can have this net that we tow behind a small boat. The net floats half in the water and half out, so it's right at the surface and is really collecting those plastic pieces floating at the surface. And this is the kinds of pieces that we're able to often find. So here's a small piece of fishing line, a little tiny piece of plastic here, and these that are largely visible by the naked eye. We've been monitoring throughout Tampa Bay. So we have a station up here in Boca Ciega Bay, out at Egmont Key, Skyway, Point Pinellas, off McDill, up in Old Tampa Bay, and then over in the Hillsborough Bay area, right at the mouth of the Alafaya. There is a lot of variability, which is expressed by these very large error bars on these averages. But what we do see is that Skyway does tend to be higher than some of the other regions, but there really isn't a whole lot of predictability in the geographic scale. What we're probably picking up here is the fact that Tampa Bay is a well-flushed estuary with water moving throughout the bay relatively quickly. So we're getting a lot of movement of those plastics. We don't get any huge high concentrations in any areas, even at the river outflow of Hillsborough Bay. We're not getting a whole lot of concentrations there. Here we can start looking at the impact of those detection methods. So what this is a filter where we've taken a water sample and filtered it, leaving behind very small particulate. And you get all of this white debris, and it's very hard to tell what of that is plastic. And these are very small particles, so you can't even get a good image on them. What we do is we can stain this with a dye that will glow bright red with certain colors, and that stain adheres to plastic. It also adheres to some other particles, but it adheres really well to plastic. So if we look at the same image under that epifluorescent, what you see is these bright glowing particles. Those are the plastic particles that we're concerned in. And you can't find that plastic particle in here and amongst all of this. This is dead organic matter, so copepod, maybe some copepods, some of the phytoplankton shells, etc. But this gives us a way that we can really start to see those very small pieces. So this staining method is really valuable for looking at those smaller pieces. As we look at what we've found in Tampa Bay, as I say, what we do is at those same 7 stations I was talking about, we collect a large plastic bucket. We have to use plastic. We use a lot of methods to make sure we're not adding extra plastic into our counts. And if we are, we're at least incorporating what might be being added. It's just too hard to go out in a small boat with a large glass container or a metal container. But what you can see here is that, again, we don't see a whole lot of geographic pattern. And interestingly enough, now Skyway, if we look at the small particles, is lower than some of those other regions. And it's really quite variable. So it tells us again that we're not getting these huge concentrations in certain areas, that there is a lot of flushing in the area. I will point out there was a previously published paper looking at Tampa Bay, looking at some of the same stations, but not quite the same. And they were finding much lower samples of particles. So here they're looking at about 1 particle per liter, and we're upwards of about 7 or 8. A lot of that is because of the difference in technique. The McEachran technique was looking at the water filter through a microscope, just with the without a lot of magnification, and trying to visually detect those pieces. So missing a lot of those small pieces. And interestingly enough, they found most of their particles were fibers, whereas we're not finding for a large number of fibers at all. There's still some fibers there, but as we move to the smaller particles, there's a lot of other plastic that was being missed by that work. So the emphasis that was sometimes coming on looking at microfibers possibly coming from your laundry, from washing machines, etc., perhaps was biased by that sampling approach. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to keep microfibers out of our laundry, but that there's a lot of other microplastics out in the bay as well. We also look at the sediments, because the sediments can give us information over longer time frames, and also look at that portion of the plastics that's settling down into the bottom of the bay. Because we know lots of plastic floats, but turns out not all plastic floats. So we want to look at that mixture of where the plastic is going within the bay. So again, what you're looking at is one of our samples that we've stained with the dye, and you can see again these plastic particles are in the sediment. So we're definitely getting these plastic particles sinking down through the water column and ending up on the sea floor. One of the things we've been seeing increasingly is we get all these black particles. Unfortunately, these ones don't dye particularly well, stain and glow particularly well, but we can look at them. And what we think most of these plastic particles are actually particles from your tires. So most of you are familiar with that every so often you have to replace your tires because they're wearing out. But where did that tire go? Well, as you accelerate and brake, that tire is wearing down and it ends up in our roadways. And of course, especially in our coastal regions, those particles that end up on our roadways are very quickly into storm drains and very quickly into the water. This is especially true of all of our causeways and bridges that are right over the water. When we get a heavy rainstorm like we've been having recently, those are going to flush fairly quickly into the bay. So here you can see a microscopic shot of those tire particles. And so this has become a real emerging concern of how much tire particles we're finding in coastal regions and estuaries. They were missed in that previous work that was all looking at floating particles. And these are not going to be going out into the open ocean in the same way. These are going to be building up in our estuaries where they fairly quickly sunk down to the sea floor. The last piece of our general monitoring that we've been doing is looking at how those plastics may or may not be being incorporated into the food web. So yes, we've got plastics in the environment, but what does that mean for the ecology? So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been looking at sampling copepods. So these are the tiny organisms at the base of the food chain. So the first organisms that are eating that floating phytoplankton. And they provide a lot of the food for the base of the food for many other organisms throughout the bay. So we sampled those copepods. And what we do with them is that we make sure that they're rinsed so that there's no of those environmental plastics clinging onto the copepods. We do have to kill the copepods. We digest them and break them apart. And when we find these kinds of glowing plastic particles, this is plastic that the copepods have ingested. So here you can shell of copepods, their carapace. It's dyed with the stain, but not as glowing as brightly as the plastic. But what we can see is that we do clearly have good evidence that the copepods are eating these plastics. We don't know how much they're passing that up the food web, and we also don't know what kind of impact that has on the copepods. Although we do have a project right now that's looking at the impact on copepods that are eating a diet that's consisting plastic, how that's affecting their egg production and hatching success. So looking at, do we see declines in the reproduction of these copepods? Again, critical for our food web if they're consuming these plastics. So we don't have results yet on that, but that we are working on. So that's a very quick overview of the base monitoring that we're doing, but we had the unfortunate example of learning of the value of baseline monitoring when the Piney Point spill occurred. So we had a scenario where in March 2021, we went out. It was our first sampling event after COVID. We were shut down for quite some time before we could get back out to our regular monitoring. And you can see here's our differing stations, the values we were seeing. And this red line represents our long-term average of counts of those particles per liter from our long-term monitoring. Shortly after the Piney Point discharge began, we were able to get a sample from our Skyway station, and we saw higher numbers than we had ever seen before. We normally sample every other month, so we didn't have the rest of our sample to see what else was going on in the bay, but we did see this very concerning spike. We then had our full regular sampling again in May 2021, seeing a much greater decline in that microplastics counts, but still much higher than our baseline averages. And we also saw it quite a bit higher up at McDill. So here's our Skyway station, here's Piney Point, and then we also saw this elevation up in McDill. This gives you a sense of just how different that sample was. So this is our Skyway sample from April 2021. And here's our March 2021 sample and our May 21 sample. So really orders of magnitude different, and we've never seen counts like this before. And fortunately, we haven't seen counts like that since. We also collaborated with Tampa Bay Estuary Program to collect during that Piney Point event from some of their stations right along the shoreline. So our Skyway station's out here. So we've got our April stations that were collected either the day that the discharge stopped or the day after. And then we've got May sampling and June sampling, and these are the different locations of the samples. And again, we placed that same baseline that we had for our long-term monitoring on here. So the April samples were a bit elevated. We did see this peak in May, but by June, we do see those numbers going back down. To put the comparison, if you look at those close to shore samples with our center of the bay Skyway sample, just to put the axes on the same, you can see again how much higher that one was. So there was clearly something going on that led to very high numbers of microplastics in the water. How that relates to Piney Point is still an ongoing question, something we haven't been able to really tease apart because, again, we saw that drop down very quickly and no clear pattern to where we had the high counts of microplastics. But I think it does highlight the value of having those long-term monitoring, because if we just collected these samples when there was an event going on, we wouldn't know if those were normal values or far out of the range of normal conditions. As we look at sort of summarizing our overall scenario of what we've been finding, it's clear that plastic is entering Tampa Bay, and we have microplastic concentrations. The high flushing, that wind, the tidal currents, the shallow water of Tampa Bay likely leads to the high variability in concentrations, and probably helps to limit the buildup of microplastics in surface water. Our suspicion is we're getting a fair bit of export out into the Gulf of Gulf of Mexico, and we're exporting it out of our estuary. However, what we are seeing is that the sediments may be of greater concern for buildup of microplastics within the estuary itself, because we're less likely to see that flushing effect taking them out. The other piece is that it is very clear that plastics are entering the food chain, and this is something that requires further analysis to see, are they moving up the food chain past the copepods, and also what kind of impact the plastics are having on the copepods. It's also critical that we have this kind of long-term monitoring in order to understand these unusual events. So our long-term goal with our project, and what we set out when we first got our TBERF funding, was to set the baseline and then to work on to establish a sustainable microplastics monitoring program in Tampa Bay. Where we're at this point is we've had success setting something up, but the sad reality is finding funding to do the long-term monitoring that's not the new sexy science or jumping on the next big thing. It's unfortunately much, much harder to fund no matter what you're trying to monitor for. People just don't want to spend a lot of money to just try and see what's happening, see what's changing. But it really is critical to our understanding of the Bay. That is a quick overview of what we've been working on. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have or expand on anything.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Does anybody have any questions for Shannon? Well, I had some questions for you. So have you noticed any seasonality associated with the microplastics, like the spikes or the dips?
We've looked at it. We're not getting any clear pattern of seasonality. What we actually think it's more tied to is recent rainfall. And while there is a wetter season and a drier season in Tampa Bay, our numbers can be completely different if there's just been a recent rainfall. So depending on where you are in Tampa Bay, last night I got completely drenched at Thurgood Marshall Middle School. So wouldn't be surprised if lower Boca Ciega Bay has a lot in it, had a lot of rainfall, stormwater, microplastics coming in there, but it can be at that kind of level. Slight elevations, but not significant towards the summertime, but so much is just how recently it just happened to rain.
Right. And do you know, I know it's not really the area of your research, but do you know of any methods of removing microplastics once they're already in the estuary?
That is exceptionally challenging. So when we take a 5-gallon bucket, so that big bucket, that's a large sort of paint bucket, we can have 2 to 3 tiny plastic particles in there. So sometimes upwards of 10. So they're so small you can't see them. So what's been suggested as an approach to try and clean up the, offshore plastic is to just tow nets through the water.
Mhm.
Yes, that will collect up plastic, but the challenge is that's going to collect up anything else that's also smaller than that net. And we devise nets to catch fish, and they're good at doing that. They'll catch fish, they'll catch floating crustaceans, they'll catch jellyfish, etc. So trying to skim the waters to remove them is not particularly effective. We can get the larger pieces out. So I know Tampa Bay has bought a boat that they're skimming around the bay, City of Tampa bought it, that they're skimming those larger pieces, and you can remove those without taking out too many organisms. But really, we need to keep those particles from getting into the bay, and we need to keep the larger things from getting into the bay because they will degrade and break down. They break down into smaller and smaller plastic pieces, but unfortunately, they don't break down into their original chemical constituents. So they're not decomposing like an apple core would do. So if you take a piece of say a plastic bag from Publix and an apple core and put them out in the environment, they're both going to break down into smaller pieces. The apple core will eventually completely disappear. The plastic bag is just going to be tiny little fragments of plastic.
And then you might not know this, but you said a lot. Sorry, you said a lot of like you think that most of the microplastics that are in the estuary are getting flushed out. But they've got to go somewhere. Do we have an idea of where those microplastics are eventually being deposited?
A lot of the floating ones are going to float with the current. So if they catch the loop current, they end up into the Florida current and then into the North Atlantic gyre. So as long as they stay floating, they'll stay within the currents. What can happen is they break into smaller pieces and then get biofouling on it. So algae, etc., that can make them heavier, which will make them sink. They can get eaten by organisms and then move through the water column as the fish that maybe ate them move through the water column. So it can be all over, but typically we're not seeing the super high concentrations in estuaries, particularly estuaries like Tampa Bay that have good waste management practices.
Okay.
Go to other countries with, without regular garbage collection and that, you're going to see much higher concentrations. That doesn't mean we should ignore microplastics in estuaries because, of course, the land is where most of our plastic and our debris is coming from. So our estuaries are one of the key conduits from the land out to the ocean. So, even though we don't have as high a concentration in our estuary, doesn't mean it's not problematic.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. There any other questions for Shannon?
I have a question for everybody else. Like, is there anything that y'all found unexpected about this, or maybe a pointed question is, by a show of hands, who knew that microplastics were entering our food web? Right. Is this the kind of thing that we're talking to people about when you are talking to people about environmental issues? Are plastics on people's radar? Or is this still something that maybe people haven't heard about yet? I would love to hear from a couple people what your experience is in the community.
I have brought it up in enough conversations that occasionally people just grit their teeth as soon as I start talking.
Ditto.
I just put into the chat, if you want some more information, we have a website on our microplastics at Eckerd. I put this the wrong one. Let me repost those in a second. I will also post information to the website that we have where we're working on a project to reduce single-use plastic, started at Eckerd College and taking it out further because, of course, once it's in the environment, it's so much harder to deal with. So, but let me just repost those for you.
And if anybody else wanted to answer too, I know Harry, I'm sure talks about this a lot. Does anyone else have the same experience or a different experience of when you bring up plastics in the environment to your peers? Everybody's heard of plastic then. All right. Well, I guess it's a
Well, it's
good thing
rather
that
interesting. Most of
people
the,
know
or
about
quite a
it.
few of the faces that I see have obviously for years been on give-a-days and other kinds of work parties where we are picking up trash. Sometimes, of course, it's other things that we do. But about 2 weeks ago, I took several family members up into the Hillsborough River. On the way up, we went through the Ybor Channel in Port Tampa there. And I assume most of you have seen a floating dry dock. It so happens that one of the floating dry docks, they just descended to let a tugboat out. And we had been picking up trash. We always carry nets. We'd been picking up trash, a piece here and a piece there. And of course, most of it is plastic. When we got up within a couple of 100 yards of that floating dry dock, we looked as though we had gone into a plastic dump because every bit of that just washed right off the floating dry dock and right out into that part of the Ybor Channel. There was so much there that we could not even continue our little trip if we had picked it all up. I still feel bad about not getting every piece of it. But if we don't cure that sort of entry into the waterway, why, we'll have microplastics. We're going to have them forever anyhow. But it's just pitiful that we can't come up with some rules that have them clean up those areas. And I've been up in the port at times when there's been heavy rain, and right off of all the land, it of course washes right into the bay, whatever's there. That's it. I'm finished.
Thanks, Harry.
I think, maybe I could add something to that as far as just the public perception. When we do the microplastics citizen science program, and this is only anecdotal, but it does seem to me that, and maybe this is a biased, cohort of people too, but it seems to me that they do know about it being in the food chain and human ingestion, but I think that there is not a lot of understanding from the public about the actual, harms and what that can cause. So just wanted to provide a little bit. It does seem that people do know about it, I think, but past that, as far as like, what could be the effects of that, I think there's very little understanding.
And I would just add, we've been doing a lot of work on educating people about plastic, both through our microplastics work and our reduced single-use efforts. And the general public is often aware of aspects about plastic, but the details and some of the issues around plastic is really very much needs some work, and especially how we can take action and try to reduce our own plastic footprint relatively easily, and there's ways we can try and encourage other people to do that.
I was going to add really quickly, namaste, everyone. Um,
Namaste.
with Eckerd College and with Professor Gowans and Shweta, we've been doing quite a bit of volunteer work in cleaning up and removing plastics throughout the years. But I also know on an emotional level, the way that we talk about this plastic issue causes a lot of anxiety, especially in the youth. And I think there was an article written about a professor at Eckerd College that kind of explored this sense of like this plastic doomsday scenario. So I think that being able to really talk about this stuff in a way where people can feel like they can get a handle on some type of solutions or can do something is helpful, because sometimes it seems so overwhelming that people get stifled, that if that makes sense.
For sure. Thanks, Dr. Porter. I would agree with that. And I think that's kind of why Harry might have where his friends are so sick of him talking about it. So they just kind of like grit their teeth and deal with it. But I think it could be potentially what you were saying. It just causes so much anxiety and it's this huge issue. So what do we do? So.
I'm going to just do one last plug. So Dr. Porter did put in a notice about a grant that Amy Sweda and I have that's for the reduction of plastic work. The EPA has awarded us a trash-free waters program. We've done this in conjunction with Tampa Bay Estuary Program. But what we are doing is we're developing an app where people can track their plastic use and refusal. So from an individual level, what that's going to do is hopefully encourage people to use less plastic, less of that single-use plastic. Then what we can see over on the back side of things, because Amy and I are scientists at heart, so we like that data, is that's going to generate data from the users of this app that can then be used for policy change or for businesses to make decisions or that kind of thing. So we're in the process of getting that app developed by a local St. Pete app development firm, and hopefully within the next couple of months we'll have the app out and released, and we'll definitely be partnering with Tampa Bay Estuary Program to share information about the app Remora once it's released.
Well, it's too bad your little particles don't glow when somebody sits down to eat some fish, scallops, or crabs or something. That might give them a thought about the whole process.
I don't think I want us, argue for putting more glowing plastic out there, but I do think that there's something to what you're saying.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Shannon, for joining in and for providing that really great presentation about microplastics in Tampa Bay. So up next, we have Devin from Keep Knowledge Beautiful. Welcome, Devin. I'm going to hand screen sharing or presenter over to you. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay.
My apologies, everybody. I was at another event, raced back here to be able to join in on this one. So my apologies for being a little bit late.
All good. We just switched the meeting around, so you weren't late. You were right on time.
And share audio because I have a little video in this too. Okay, perfect. All right. Can everybody see the slide on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, yes. So my name is Devin. I'm the Education Program Coordinator with Keep Pinellas Beautiful. And I'm going to be talking to you guys today, really just kind of about our approach that we have here at Keep Pinellas Beautiful to plastics and microplastics and the programming that we do with the community. And first off, just a shout out to Tampa Bay Estuary Program, because this whole, just everything we do with microplastics wouldn't be possible without you guys. You guys are the ones who sort of jump-started everything with the mini grants that you awarded us. And we're super proud of where we're going with all this and where we've gone and what we've done. And so thank you guys very much. So I'm just going to very briefly give you just a couple quick slides here on Keep Pinellas Beautiful, just in case. I know most of you are likely aware of who we are, but basically we are the local affiliate of Keep America Beautiful here in Pinellas County. That basically we are an environmental nonprofit with the mission to conserve and beautify our natural environment by means of community engagement and education. So those are really two of our big words right there, our engagement and education. So we want to get the public educated on various environmental topics, but then also get people involved in actually going out and making a difference about it. That's sort of the big thing that we want to do, to empower people to make the differences in their lives, the small little behavioral changes, and telling their friends and family is really what it's all about. we have a number of different programs that we have with getting people educated from preschool all the way through adults, getting students involved in lots of different ways. Cleanups is probably what we're best known for. People tend to associate that with us. I'm actually going to talk to you a little bit about our ambassador program today, because actually our microplastics program is actually embedded into the ambassador program. But then community improvement, doing events like planting trees, gardening, planting native plants, removing invasive plants, all those sorts of things. We have annual events. We actually have one going on right now with the International Coastal Cleanup. Then brand new program, the Hospitality Eco Partnership Program, where we partner with the hotels and the restaurants and various tourism industries to help spread that word about what we can do to be more sustainable. And then a litter hotline. So if you guys happen to see litter, big piles of litter on the side of the road, you can give us a call, and we can do what we can to go and take care of that. But focus for today is going to be the microplastics programming that we have here at KPB. So just giving you a little bit of history on how this kind of all got started. We've known for a while that a pervasive problem have been single-use plastics, with just in general, all of, if not many of the top 10 littered items each year being different kinds of single-use plastics, knowing that then these will break down into microplastics. And so a few years ago, basically an opportunity kind of presented itself with the Florida Microplastic Awareness Project, or FMAP, which is through the University of Florida IFAS system. Basically here in Pinellas County, the Pinellas Extension had some microplastic sampling gear that they then talked with a local group called the Sea Turtle Trackers, who were potentially going to sort of take that gear to be able to sample, filter, and analyze microplastic samples, but they didn't really have it upon themselves to do it, so they reached out to us. And then, as I mentioned just a little while ago, we were able then to reach out to TBEP and get a mini grant to actually sort of get an actual microplastic educational program, citizen science program, launched and underway here at Keep Pinellas Beautiful. So we sort of took the role of taking on that gear and doing this program. And so this program, basically our number one goal with this is to educate the public and raise awareness. It really is that thing that, to make people understand that this is something that we can all do something about. I know it was just being mentioned that, it is a lot of doom and gloom, but the whole purpose of this is to say, yeah, the situation isn't great, but we can do something. It's not the end of the world. We all do have a responsibility, and there's easy things we can do to try to make a difference. And then basically, this was one of the primary programs that helped launch our ambassador program. So just to kind of go into a little bit about what the ambassador program is and how microplastics fits into that. So our ambassador program, essentially what happens is as more and more people are getting to know about our organization, there are more and more requests from various entities to want to do events with us. And we're only so many people here at the organization of Keep Pinellas Beautiful. And so we are actually recruiting volunteers to help us run our programming and spread our mission through the rest of the county. So essentially these volunteer leaders become the face of Keep Pinellas Beautiful for our organization throughout the county, essentially becoming liaisons between the communities and us here. The whole purpose is to inspire and empower residents because they're volunteers and residents just like everyone else. It's just basically one of their own. And through this, we have a few different ambassador programs, but one of them became the Microplastics Ambassador Program with a few specific purposes, one of which was to recruit and train citizens to become citizen scientists who would then collect, filter, and analyze water samples, basically following the scientific methodology of the Florida Microplastic Awareness Project, which essentially is a statewide program that is a citizen science program that basically people all over the state are collecting these samples and submitting them back to University of Florida IFAS for them to have in their database and analyze and report on. So our goal, as I mentioned before, was to be raising awareness about the dangers of single-use plastics and what we can do about it. So at the end of the day, that really is the ultimate goal of our ambassador program. So through different educational programming means, through what our citizen scientists are collecting, these are all different ways for us to inform the community about single-use plastics and about microplastics and things like that. And of course, then these ambassadors, a lot of them are ending up being students. And so that's actually kind of great because it's giving them some basic lab experience, giving them leadership schools, able to contribute to the statewide FMAP data sets, all these types of things. So it's actually some really good experience for a lot of our ambassadors in this program to put on their resume too. So it's kind of an added bonus. And just to date, so right now we have 14 active ambassadors in this specific program. Since 2020 when we launched it. Of course, we launched this program like I think a week before COVID hit. So it's been a challenge just for that reason ever since the beginning. But since the beginning, we've had 36 ambassadors, and it continues to be one of these programs that we're always getting inquiries about. We actually have 48 people on our waiting list right now. We just don't have the capacity to bring on more at the moment. But as we continue to grow, we're hoping to reach out to more and more of these people to invite them to start becoming active as citizen scientists with us. So here's just a quick little video, and I hope the audio is going to work here, that just basically in a couple minutes just kind of shows you the steps of what our microplastics ambassadors do.
I'm going to collect my water sample.
Awesome work. So we got to get all the water out, and we're going to do that by using a vacuum filter. We've got this set up that we're going to pour the water in the top, and it goes through this little tiny piece of paper. But once this is empty, we'll have all of the contents from in here on that piece of paper. But it's a variety of organic material, possibly plastic material, we don't know yet. That was in that 1 liter sample, now all on a piece of paper. Scanning the filter paper here, looking to see what we can find. All this looks like natural organic material, algae or other types of sediments possibly, but oh, wait, we found a little blue fiber here. This might be worth taking a closer look and seeing what this is. This could be natural, it might not. But we actually need to pick up this tiny, tiny fiber that we can't even see with our eyes. We have to use the microscope to see it. We have to use a very fine point forceps. Pick it up and put it over an open flame for about 1 second. See how it reacts. If it bubbles and melts, we know it's plastic. If it singes and turns black on the edges, we know it's a natural organic type fiber.
It melted. It's plastic.
You're right, it did melt. That is plastic. So we have found a plastic fiber on our sample here. As you can tell, look at the edges there. You can see how the edges have kind of melted. So that's how we know. So we'll write this one down as a piece of plastic. The first one we found in our sample here. So that's the basic process of what we do. After we filter a sample onto basically a filled piece of filter paper, we look at it under the microscope. And then as we find basically these objects that don't look like they belong, or even if they sometimes do, we'll test them over an open flame and just basically see how they react to see whether or not they may or may not be plastic. So along with this, as I was saying, the education aspect is a huge portion of this whole program, because that's the whole point, is to spread knowledge about this issue. And so through this, we've made a series of videos, and actually even still have a few more planned to educate the public on this topic. We made a handout, which basically goes to every single cleanup that we do. Whether or not we're present, or it's people come to pick up supplies to run their own events, we make sure that people are shown this handout so that they can share with their own people at their cleanup, basically the issues of plastics and microplastics and things like that. We do a number of outreach and presentations for people of all ages and groups and everything like that, focusing on this issue as well. We do cleanups with youth, with all ages, with a specific 10, 15, 20 minutes set aside for us to actually have a discussion on this plastic litter issue and on microplastics and things like that. We have set up one. We're hoping to do more. We have a couple other schools in mind, but basically setting up a microplastic lab in the schools. We have one set up right now in Eastlake High School. And basically they collect their own samples and they run and filter, and it's just great. So again, this is just a way for us to spread this knowledge around the county, get more students, more young people interested in what we're finding. We've made a series of worksheets as well, basically that are for basically K through 8, varying age levels for these worksheets. But on top of that, we have a curriculum that we've made that basically is all about plastics and microplastics. The idea for this at the beginning, I might be jumping ahead a little bit, was essentially how can we turn our lab experience into an activity for the public, that may not be able to come here and do the lab work with us. How can we sort of have them recreate their own experience? And somehow that idea of doing that one activity turned into 53 activities. I'm not sure how it sort of grew like that, but I guess we just had this vision and it just kept going. So a little bit more on the curriculum in just a little bit, but just to kind of go over some accomplishments that we've had in the last couple of years. Since we started in 2020, about March of 2020, I think we've collected 360 samples to date from saltwater, freshwater, brackish water, all types of water samples from all over Pinellas County, and submitting that data to Florida Microplastic Awareness Project. We've done a lot of engagement, as we talked about, with virtual and in-person lessons, presentations, videos, outreach. In 2020, we were able to interact with a little bit over 2,000 people this way. It was kind of a slow year because, number one, we were just launching the program, but also the pandemic was sort of in full-fledged at that point. But in 2021, we were able to interact with 12,400 people. So the number that we're doing is increasing for sure, and giving materials to 431 cleanups that we hosted or sponsored that year. Social media, just between 2020 and 2021, we have sort of clocked 70,200 views of posts that we've made that are related to plastic litter or microplastics or related topics. And we've also created a plastic-free pledge for people to take that essentially is a list of 10 different fairly easy items of things that they can do to help limit single-use plastic usage and litter in the environment. And they get to pick and choose which of those 10 things they think they can do, and then we'll send them a certificate basically saying, here you go, it's awesome, here's your pledge and the things you said you'd do. And to date, we've had 207 people that have taken that pledge. So just a little bit more about this curriculum then. Basically, our sort of subtitle for it is The Story of Plastics, or Stop Plastics. Sort of works. There you go. As I was saying, now at this point, it's a total of 53 activities, demonstrations, lessons, all those sorts of things as well. And we've broken it into 4 parts. So the first part is all about plastics, which really just kind of talks about what is plastic and what is litter. Kind of just talks about both those topics. The second part is macroplastic and marine debris. So that talks about the part of the story where that plastic litter gets into our waterways and what are the issues, how much is there with the big plastic in our oceans and waterways. Part 3 then is about microplastics. So part 3 is, well, what happens then when that plastic breaks down? What are microplastics? What harm do they cause? How much is there? Where is it? All those sorts of things. And then possibly the most important part of it all is the 4th section, which is all about what you can do. So we want to emphasize with a whole section devoted just to activities and lessons and things like that about what, people can do to make a difference about this issue. Alongside this, we're also building a teacher's kit, essentially a rentable kit that teachers can come and pick up from our office. And basically it provides a lot of the supplies and things they need to do a good number of the activities within the entire curriculum, so that basically they don't have to go out and purchase all the pieces themselves. They can just use that and make it much easier to teach. So in general, this what I like to call the story of plastics, basically, as I just sort of described from start to finish, is sort of this topic that, especially microplastics within it, is relatively new. It's really just the last 10, 20 years that it's really sort of really come into the view of people, and it's becoming much more of a big story. But what's interesting is that with the story of plastics, this full story from start to finish, it's not normal curriculum in Pinellas schools. Maybe there's a piece where it talks about one part within it, but not that whole story of the plastics are made that become marine debris, that break into microplastics, and then what we can do about it. So basically, this curriculum, the whole point of it is to fill that knowledge gap and create environmental stewards. So it tells that whole story all in one place. So we designed this curriculum for 7th graders in mind. Basically, at that point, they're working on this connection to and reinforcement of life science concepts. So in this age, they're learning about symbiotic relationships, food chains, energy transfer, food webs, limiting factors, adaptation, all these sorts of things. And basically, this is then a great intro to concepts or extensions of the above concepts. And there is a lot of those topics that are discussed and have activities and lessons and things within the curriculum. As well as then it also helps to meet some state standards in natural sciences, math, social studies, reading comprehension, all of those sorts of things. And the also nice thing about this too is that around middle school, 7th, 8th grade, sort of tends to be the time when students start to need community service for various clubs and scholarships and honor societies or whatever it might be that they're in. And so it's sort of just a nice pairing to this, that there's definitely ways that they can get some community service by helping with cleanups or whatever it might be related to plastic litter and microplastics. And of course, just because it's designed for 7th graders doesn't mean the concepts can't be applied to younger students or older students and everything like that. So what we think is great about this is that it really is a whole library of resources. The full story, as I was mentioning, very few resources tell that full story. So this is a place that basically you can go to find concepts and lessons and things like that on everything. So it does include, of course, our own original content, videos, lessons, worksheets, etc. But it's also a compilation of other freely available online content from other sources as well. So the whole purpose of this is there's great stuff that other people have made that is freely available online. But it took us a long time to compile all this stuff. So the whole purpose is the educator can spend less time searching and more time teaching. They have everything that they need if they want to teach about this particular story in this one curriculum source. And of course, then we have that rentable kit that we can provide to the teachers. And what's great too is that we are freely providing this material to the community as well. So content is available upon request, absolutely, for all of you guys and for everyone. Just real quick, just to show you kind of what each section of the 4 parts of the curriculum looks like. It starts with background information for the educator, which we've pulled together from various sources ourselves and basically compiled it so that the teacher can educate themselves on the topic before they teach. What's still in the works, we are still working on making some video presentations that will basically go with each of the 4 different sections. Then there is a section that will tell you what standards are met for each activity within the section of the curriculum. We have a vocab list as well for each of the 4 sections. And then there's a background reading for the student so that they can kind of get an idea of what this whole section is going to be about, followed with a quiz. And then the various activities that we have that are designed for that section. Within each, basically how they're broken down is we have a background. So it'll be like a paragraph that kind of tells the teacher exactly what they need to know about that specific activity. And then the objective, materials, and time so that the teacher knows exactly the purpose of what they're doing, what they need, how long it's going to take. Of course, the directions so that the teacher knows what to follow in order to do the entire lesson. Discussion topics. Well, an important part of this is that final discussion to make sure the students have taken away what they need to take away from the lesson, and then also advance the lesson as well. So these are basically ideas to be able to use the same lesson we just did, but perhaps for older students or for gifted students, honor students, whatever it might be, so that it can be applicable to more students as well. So we did this even for the other activities that we found that were freely available. We sort of reorganized and oftentimes added in these different sections ourselves to sort of make it so that it's just one continuous story that we're telling in style of lesson. And then each of the 4 sections ends with a final assessment activity that basically just helps to make sure the students have grasped the overall idea of the different activities within it. So that's essentially what the curriculum is all about. So, oops, I left that in there. That's okay. Basically, this is our plastic-free pledge. So these are the 10 items that we like to encourage the public that they can reasonably and potentially easily do to really help make a big difference for doing their part to help keep Pinellas beautiful, keep the state beautiful, keep the country beautiful. And yeah, if any of you guys are interested in taking this pledge as well, you can write me an email, and I'd be more than happy to send you the direct link. It's a Google form essentially for you to fill out, and then we'll send you a certificate when you're all done, and you can put it up on your fridge and show all your friends and family the things that you think you can do to help make a difference. And of course, you're always welcome to help join us here at Keep Pinellas Beautiful with what we do, volunteer. You can become a microplastic ambassador, help us with our cleanups, and that's the big thing. And just once again, a big thank you to Tampa Bay Estuary Program, because without you guys, it was really you guys that helped us get this whole program off the ground. So a shout out to you guys for sure. And yeah, anybody have any questions?
Great.
That was
Thanks,
a very, very good presentation.
Thank you.
I do have a question that came to mind, though. And,
Yeah.
and this is somewhat subjective, of course. A typical water bottle.
Yeah.
How many, by the time it is quote unquote dissolved down into microplastics, how many particles are we talking about? Of course, I realize it just keeps breaking apart, but
that's
just general microplastic.
That was going to be my answer, is I don't honestly know, because it does just keep breaking down into more and more pieces. It doesn't really ever stop.
But of something that you can see under your microscope, let's say.
Yeah. I've never done the math to figure out, like, if you were to say, by definition, microplastic is a piece that's 5 millimeters in size or smaller across. That we could do the math then and figure out, well, how many 5 millimeter pieces would there be? These sorts of things. I mean, what I can tell you is just from the research and stuff I was doing when I was trying to learn more about microplastics. I think an estimate that I found when watching an EPA lecture was, they said that essentially the average number of like estimate of how many pieces of microplastics are floating at just the surface of our oceans around the world is like 35 trillion. Something like that. And I mean, that's not related just to a bottle, but like that's what they're saying, like the average, like that's like the middle range. It's like somewhere between like 15 to 51 trillion are like the estimates. And
is there any part of, let's say, the average bottle that is truly biodegradable? Is there any element in there or in a plastic bottle that is truly biodegradable, is as we would think about a piece of wood or anything else?
To the best of my knowledge, no. It's all it's two different kinds of plastic, I believe, the lid and the bottle. But unfortunately, no, the plastic isn't biodegradable.
So it's 100% pollution then, no matter how you look at it.
I will jump in for a second. There has been a lot of moves to try to create biodegradable or compostable plastic. The challenge that has provided is that it can be broken down, but it requires an industrial composter. So I see a lot of people moving, I can get this plastic cup, or restaurants wanting to use this plastic cup because it's compostable. But what they don't understand is if you don't have an industrial composter that can break it down, and there is none that is a large-scale industrial composter in Tampa Bay area. So I do see restaurants in the area trying to use this compostable or biodegradable plastic, which is a step in the right direction. But unfortunately, without that industrial composter, it's basically just the same as plastic. And the frustrating part is these, places like restaurants, they're spending extra money to do that without actually providing any improvement to the environment. There's a lot better things they could be doing. But that messaging is not well promoted. And a lot of it's because there are these companies that want to sell compostable plastic. And it's a greenwash scenario of, look, there's this environmentally friendly product. And yes, it is, but only if it gets separated out into that specific waste stream, and if it can be compostable. So there's some hope, but it needs a lot more infrastructure.
So Shannon, And why is this plastic, like, why would these compostable plastics not be biodegradable in, say, my home compost?
They require really high temperatures, and yours is never going to get that hot. And it needs that high temperature over an extended time period. So it's really going to take a while, take a much bigger scenario. There are some, and there's a lot of push in Europe to build these because of so much tighter regulation on plastic. But at least within the US, there's very little demand for it at this point, and not a lot of infrastructure being built. And it's the kind of thing that a municipality often has to develop, and it can be a valuable tool in waste management because it can also help lessen the amount of waste that they're producing. So I know of some places that have elected to put these kinds of composting facilities in place as a way of trying to preserve their landfills for longer, because it just reduces down the volume going into the landfill. But that is rare to see, that you see that kind of long-term, large-scale investment.
So there was a question in the chat from Nadine. She asked, is the curriculum available online?
Yeah, not as of yet, but if you are interested, just let me know your email and I will be more than happy to share it with you. It's going to be a pretty massive file. So likely what's going to happen is we'll probably put it on like a Google Drive and just provide you with the link to the folder, essentially, so you can open it up and get the documents within it.
I will also add that at the estuary program, we are working on creating a communications bibliography with a lot of the products that were developed through our Bay Mini Grant programs, and some of the products that Joe creates and some of our other partners create. So we hope to have this sometime, at least partially launched in the upcoming year. So stay tuned for that, and that would be a good place to access a lot of these resources. Ed also threw in the chat that absent eliminating use of plastics in our society on a grand scale, there needs to be major innovations and better thought on how we manage the full life cycle of plastics in society. So he offered some recommendations from the MacArthur Foundation in the chat. So thank you, Ed, for that. Any other questions, conversations?
I have a question. Maybe I should know this, Devin, but I don't. Is there a dissemination plan for this curriculum? Are you working with teachers or teachers associations to get this out to schools?
We've presented it in a couple different forums, like similar to this, and we have some teachers and people who have been interested in it. But we do sort of plan on like blasting it out to like through the local community here. Once you know it's you know got the final stamp and posted. Yeah, so I mean we do have potential contacts, but by all means, if any of you guys know of any teachers or educators or whoever that might be interested in this, we do expect a big portion of this spreading to be via word of mouth as well, teachers telling other teachers, and social media and all those sorts of things that we plan on doing with it. So by all means, yeah, let us know.
And this is
What
Bethany.
is the?
It's also
Oh,
with
sorry.
APB. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having weird issues with my sound today. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. One of the big pushes we're doing right now is reestablishing our roles within the school system. Obviously, with COVID and not being allowed in the classrooms for the last 3 years, that has put kind of us on the back burner of being in the classes. But with our high school chapter program and our development of other programs within the schools, we're working our way back in. So that is a goal, is to disseminate this through the middle schools throughout Pinellas County, starting slowly because there is going to be a large request for presentations, and Devin is only one person. But we're hoping that we can share it and they can use it themselves, but also have us incorporate presentations in class. So as Devin mentioned, contacts are wonderful. If you know anybody, Devin can share his email, but it is our goal to get it into the schools, working through the actual school system.
Cool. What's the like timeline? You said like a final stamp, Devin. When is that expected?
For sure by mid-October, it'll be done
Okay.
and up and on.
I'm just thinking like the Pinellas County Teachers Association and even the school boards, maybe this is something appropriate for their, and maybe you already have plans, but I think those could be some great avenues. Is anyone here a teacher? Or have a kid that's a teacher or a brother or a...
Or someone that's homeschooled.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Homeschool society, right? No, homeschool groups that do that kind of thing too. Yeah.
I just put my email in the chat as well for everybody in case you need it as well.
Great.
And it should be noted, the curriculum is actually complete. Where we hit the kind of stop is the kits. It was kind of funny, as Devin mentioned, this started as something small. Let's create this curriculum that's tied to microplastics. And it escalated pretty quickly because there's a very, comprehensive story behind where microplastics comes from. And now this kit is effectively several totes large. So we're working on how to make this more user-friendly for teachers, whether they, want to rent out small pieces of it just to cover certain sets of presentations, or if they want the whole thing to explore, they better come with a U-Haul. So it's that's where we are right now with trying to make sure we can provide all of these resources effectively to as many teachers as possible, because it is such a beautiful story in the sense, like, it tells a lot. And while it's not a beautiful story because it's plastic, but Devin has done a phenomenal job. He started with us as an intern specifically to grow our microplastics program, and it's now full-time, and he's done a great job. And TBEP has every bit the role to where this is today because they funded us through the mini grants.
That was kind of a serious question. Do we have any teachers on the CAC or any former teachers? No? Okay. Just something to note, maybe as a recruitment niche. I don't know.
Good idea.
Yeah, and Devin, I did want to, this is Joe from TBP, did want to mention that with the St. Pete Science Fest, finally coming back in person early next year, that might be a really great opportunity to launch it as well.
Yeah, bring an activity or two from it, absolutely.
Yeah, try to get a table there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm not a teacher in the public school system, but I do have connections throughout the schools. And I also work with Leah McCrae, who works with the city, who works throughout the school system as well. So if you need context about getting into the schools, I can help with that.
Oh, that'd be great. Absolutely. Yeah, I can get your contact info and just sort of start a conversation with you. That'd be awesome.
I'll put that in the chat box.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then I had one last question for you, Devin. So you said that you have collected over 300 samples throughout the estuary. At the estuary program, one of our focuses and one of our strategic plans, or one of the components in our strategic plan, is to open up some of these data to make it more freely and more accessible to everybody. So is there a place where folks can access the data that you and your volunteers have collected?
Not as of yet, but that's a very interesting idea. Right now, so each of the we've submitted the data to FMAP, so we like using their online resource, like the Submit Your Data Here page. Each of our like data samples we've collected are each in their own Excel sheet, but I do have like a master Excel sheet that basically we're copying and pasting all the data, so we have it in one source, so that we can work with it. But I could work with you and figure out a way that we can share that with the public.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe we can bring Shannon in to see how if they could use your data in some form.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I'd be more than happy to share it with you guys and
great.
let you guys. Yeah, like with it too. Like I've collected is in heavy quotes because we just use freely available online sources, various environmental data as best as we can
Hmm.
to potentially correlate with the samples because you never know. So that's part of the collection process is filling out all this different like tidal data and wave data and rain and like what's the moon doing, like all these things. Yeah, who knows if they have any kind of correlation or not, but until we actually have a chance to analyze it, then it's worth having for the moment. So by all means, yeah, we'd be more than happy to share that with anyone who'd be interested in taking a stab at seeing if there's any type of statistical correlations going on.
Yeah, we certainly would be interested to try and coordinate with that. And we also do have plans once we get our data set cleaned up to work with Tampa Bay Estuary and try to make that our data more available as well.
Sure.
Great. Well, any other final questions, comments? Okay, hearing none. Last thing I wanted to do for just for fun is to kind of provide a what you can do takeaways. So what you can do to help reduce microplastics, and this can be something that this could be a group discussion but these are just a couple of the things that I came up with. And so if you have any other suggestions, please throw them in the chat, speak up so that we can make kind of a better list that we can spread out to the CAC to try and help to take away this eco anxiety or reduce the eco anxiety and show that you can be part of the solution and you should be part of the solution, and even little steps have a pretty big impact. So some of the things that I threw in there were stop it at its source. Avoid single-use plastics, and you don't have to go entirely zero waste, which can be very hard to wrap your head around. So just starting small, using, like Devin said, bringing reusable bags to the grocery stores, avoiding plastic water bottles and bringing your own water bottles, things like that. Another thing that I've been trying to move towards is buying clothes from organic materials. There's a lot of companies like Freefly, who Maya and I love, but they make their shirts out of bamboo. So that's just a one that we like to use, especially for field work because they have hoods and they're long sleeves. And then remove it before it breaks down. Participate in local cleanups. Most of us already do that, so thanks for that. But even more than that, kind of if you see it, pick it up. Every storm drain in our area leads to the estuary. So if you see it, even if it isn't yours, if you're not at a big formal cleanup, but if you're just in Publix parking lot, please remove it. That's going to help reduce microplastics. And then support companies that are investing in debris removal or utilizing debris in some form. Again, one of the companies I like to use is Nerdle in the Rough. She cleans up plastic on her beaches and turns it into really crazy jewelry. So that's one that I like. Another popular one is 4Ocean, but I'm sure there's many. And then get involved and help determine these hotspots. So there's a few different citizen science projects that you can get involved in. There's Nerdle in the Rough, Nerdle Patrol, which is put on by somewhere in Texas, blanking now. Yeah. so you can get involved through that program, and that's helping to track nurdles, which are the raw plastic materials. And then also get involved in Keep Pinellas Beautiful's microplastics programming, their citizen science. Paige, did you say Tampa Baywatch has a microplastics monitoring with citizen science?
So no, we actually just use the one for the University of Florida, what they use. And I'm not sure actually who we give the data to, but we just kind of use that same program.
Okay. So getting involved in one of those organizations or one of those projects. And then finally, a big one is vote, let your voice be heard. I think that's an important one. Does anybody else have any others that they'd like to add to this list? Does anybody have something that they like to do and they find easy to do?
I think also the question I want to know from the group, like when someone comes to you with this sort of like overwhelming dread of the environmental issues that we have going on, what is something that you tell people? I'm curious, like if there's an action that you ask friends or strangers to take, whether it be volunteerism or something they do on their own. Maybe 2 or 3 people can tell me, like, what is your go-to thing that you ask people to do or suggest that they do?
I can probably. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just say, start small. Don't use something one day and don't use it the next day.
That was, yeah, exactly what I was going to say. Was, yeah, just basically like as I think it was Sheila that was saying, like the ultimate goal is, of course, for everyone to be zero waste, but that's completely unrealistic. So what you can do is just live your life, and when you realize that you're interacting with single-use plastics, just think to yourself, what can I do next time that maybe I can make this change, that I can cut this single-use plastic out, and maybe you're at the grocery store and you're using the produce bags and you're like, oh, well, maybe next time I'll buy reusable produce bags, and it's just making exactly as was just said, just one small change at a time.
So I don't think that my answer is going to be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Paige.
I'm not sure that my answer is going to be totally popular. I'm not going to lie. But public shaming can go a long way. And, I do think it's important that we hold the companies responsible. I think all these people who are willing to come and do cleanups and willing to, do citizen science projects to learn about this, those people are amazing. But really, the onus should be on the companies who are responsible for using and creating these plastics. And so I think one thing I always suggest, which forgive me for saying this, is that you call out the companies that are, using excessive amounts of plastic, especially if it's a company that you like and you want to use their product, write them. And I think templates to write them are really wonderful for people who have no idea what to say. So, a template that says, how you should compose a letter to the company and their customer service, but also a template for how they can post it on social media and get other people to, kind of realize all of the excessive amounts of microplastics that they use, or not microplastics, but single-use plastics that they use. So that's one thing.
And the thing that I would add is to remember that you're probably not doing this alone, and that there is a real value in collective action. So, for example, when we had a 2-year project at Eckerd College that we were monitoring a lot of plastic use. And in those 2 years, just at Eckerd, we had over 1 million water bottle fills go on at our filling stations. So that's, in essence, 1 million water bottles saved, and in a fairly small community in a fairly short amount of time. So there is real value to that collective. You might not feel like your own action to refuse that water bottle is that big, but if you can build a community of it, and as I said, that's one of the things that we're hoping our app will do, is it'll allow you to also connect with other people who are also trying to refuse plastic. And I will definitely share with Sheila, who can share out to you when our app is released, and hopefully have you all be interested in using it and sharing it with your friends too.
Paige, I hear you thinking that your answer is an unpopular one, but I have done that for sure. I want to give you an example. Lonnie's downtown is like my favorite sandwich shop, and they used to put everything in styrofoam. And I just mentioned to the owner one day how important it was to me to stop using styrofoam. And he was like, I got it. It's totally on my radar. It's something we're working on. And it took 3 years from that point, but the other day I was at Lonnie's and realized that nothing was styrofoam anymore. And I was like, hey man, that's freaking great. Like, I'm so excited to see that you're transitioning away from plastic. So there is a way to do it where it's not necessarily shaming, but like calling them in and offering to help even find a resource that might be helpful to them. And Sue, you were going to speak up. And before you do, I have to know, is your last name Oldsmar? No, it's not, right?
No, it's Brandon, which is just as bad because that's another town. So, I was just going to say that I have a lot of nieces and nephews and kids. So at Christmas time, I try to, way back when we gave them all reusable bags before people were using them, and just put them in their hands so that they could use. We gave out reusable straws and things like that for Christmas presents, and just gave them an opportunity to get used to having something that was good for the environment. So just trying to cut down on presents that are creating more litter and things, and just trying to use things that will establish good habits. So that's one thing. Thanks.
Great idea, Sue. And the holidays are coming up. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Great. Well,
Sheila, if I could, sorry, still having issues here. I would add to the public shaming note. So while not everybody is comfortable with coming out and vocalizing like their distaste for an organization or a business's use of products, Keep It Honest Beautiful is working on a hospitality program that's geared towards hotels, but also restaurants and other food vendor services like food trucks and things like that, where we can provide educational resources on how to take that sustainable step within your business. We're collaborating with USF and their sustainable tourism program. We're putting together resources. We're not trying to tell people what to do, but we're trying to provide those that access to these businesses to understand that there are products, groups like Auburn Supply and things like that provide access to these products, but also educational resources that can go to staff and guests on topics like reducing single-use plastic or grease management or native landscaping. So if there's a group you want to reach out to, or anybody who's just not comfortable having that really vocal approach, we're happy to reach out to them in a different way to offer those resources. And that program is growing, and we're hoping to receive another large grant to support its growth. So just throwing that out there.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thank you to Shannon and Devin for presenting today, and everybody on the CAC for participating and chatting along. So just a few, we're almost at the end of the meeting, but just wanted to let you guys know a few events that are coming up. This week is National Estuaries Week, so it's an excuse for us to celebrate how amazing the best estuary is. So we are having an event tomorrow night. It's at a local brewery in Manatee County at Motorworks, and this is a fun game night type of event. So if you want to come out and drink beer with us and be nerdy and play nerd games, it should be a good time. We're also on the 22nd of October, we are co-hosting with Keep Pinellas Beautiful and Water Warrior Alliance, the Tampa Bay Ocean Sweep, and this will be taking place at Grandview Park with opportunities to launch your boat at a few different boat launches. But basically, the Tampa Bay Ocean Sweep is a trash collection tournament, so you can participate on the water, either through boat, kayak, you can be a diver, or you can participate on land at Bartlett Park. So it should be a really awesome event, but I will need folks not only to participate in the event, but if you're willing to help out with some of the day of logistics, I'm thinking like helping to weigh in trash as boats bring it back to Grandview, things like that. If you're interested in participating in helping us kind of run the show, please reach out to me. We're looking for volunteers, so wanted to throw that out there. And the link to register for that is online, or is on the agenda. And then we have a couple estuary info paddles that we're doing in partnership with Tampa Bay Waterkeeper and Coastal Kayaks. So these are going out of Fort DeSoto, and we'll be heading out and doing a paddle, a couple-hour paddle in Boca Ciega Bay, and to talk about everything estuary. So the seagrasses, water quality, mangroves, barrier islands, things like that. So if you're interested, if you have questions, if you just want to come out and paddle with us, please sign up. You can sign up for those events at the Tampa Bay Waterkeepers website. And then the last thing, just wanted to throw on your radar, we're doing an estuary draft and learn at Green Bench in late November. And so this will just be, we'll potentially doing trivia, but this is with partnership with Keep Pinellas Beautiful, Tampa Bay Waterkeeper, probably other organizations will participate. And then as usual, hello? Hi, do you have any trash? Hold on one moment. No, thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. And then we're also starting to host our Give a Day for the Bay. So if you want to come out and get your hands dirty, stay tuned for some of those. Does anybody else have other things going on that they want to note add to the group? Let the group know.
You go.
Sorry, this is Erica. I just have one question. If there's somebody in the group who considers them an expert or themselves an expert or knows an expert in vertical oyster gardens, I'd love to have a chat about a couple ideas with somebody, or someone can connect me with a vertical oyster garden person. That'd be great. We're thinking about a project at the college, so I just want to. Well, I had a few people on the phone about the estuary. I'm looking for some help.
Well, we at the estuary program would love to partner. I'm also thinking, Paige, you guys might be interested in partnering.
Yeah, so I will send you the contact info for Eric Plage, who is currently doing our vertical oyster program. But now it will be switched over actually to Richard Radigan, who is going to be doing the vertical oyster program, vertical oyster garden program, as well as the shell recycling program. So I will give you both of their contacts,
okay,
and I can send those to you directly.
Thank you so much.
I also just want to highlight a really successful event that took place this past weekend in partnership with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. We had 64 volunteers at Bartlett Park this past weekend that helped remove over 230 pounds of trash from the surrounding community, as well as helped us plant, I think it was 14 trees in the park to add to the no-mow zones. And then we had a good sized group help us do storm drain marking. So super awesome event, great way to kick off the Estuaries Week, and thank you to TBEP for sponsoring that.
I just also wanted to quickly thank Tampa Bay Estuary Program and Joe especially for taking Eckerd College first years out in August. and doing a cleanup at Clam Bayou. They really, really enjoyed that experience. It was awesome. So thank you so much. And we're definitely looking for putting together some projects moving forward into the future.
Our pleasure.
There is, I'm not sure if y'all have heard of the solar co-ops. Has anybody heard of that? No, it's like when a group of people get together and they all get solar panels together, and sometimes you can get them for cheaper because you can get like a bulk discount. These co-ops are run by an organization called Solar United Neighbors, or SUN. They're a really great organization. They just want to help people get solar. They have an information session coming up. That's the Facebook event. And here's the just regular old website for people who aren't social media peeps. But get people to go just to learn about solar. Obviously, clean energy is important as a transition away from fossil fuels. So I wanted to make y'all aware of that too.
Anything else? Okay. Well, thanks everybody for participating on this call. And our next meeting is, the date is still to be determined, but it will be next January, and I am going to have this one in person. So hopefully I'm going to try and pick somewhere at one of our Bay Mini Grant locations so that you guys can get out and see one of our Bay Mini Grant restoration projects. So I'll be coordinating with that and try to get it on your calendars as soon as possible. So just wanted to let you know, in person, yay, we can party. So yeah, with that, again, thanks all. Hope to see you out and about this fall.